Grace, mercy, and peace to all of you. And if we could get a microphone, and I'm going to have you give one of those to Vern. Vern, if you would pick one up from these guys back here. There you go. Thanks. This morning, as we begin our message, we're going to have a little presentation, a little sermonette by Vern Grunke, who is a member of St. Matthew's in Cedar Bluffs. But he has been in and out of here for a while, and I'm just going to let him start. This morning, as we come, remember that the cross that we bear is memories. So, Vern, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll go from there.
Okay, good morning. My name is Vern. I'm a griever. A griever, someone grieving the loss of a loved one. As I look around here, I see a number of you who have experienced the same thing, a loss of a spouse, a mother, father, grandmother, someone like that you love very dearly. So I know I'm not alone. Those of you who have a loss will understand what I'm talking about. Those of you who haven't yet experienced this, there's nothing I can say that will make you understand. After a 15-year battle with lung disease, my wife died 2.5 years ago on September 28th, 2009. Of course, for me, it was quite an experience. My life suddenly was just a mess. I didn't know what to do. I was very scared. I was alone. I started trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I called my big sister, called my little sisters. I even called my sergeant from Vietnam. I called him up. He had lost his wife to ovarian cancer many years even before my wife succumbed. And I said, Uncle Russ, that's kind of the guy he was. And I said, now what? And he gave me the words of wisdom. He said, well, you got to go on with your life. It's got to go on. And he says, remember one thing, if you don't think anything else, it will get better. Things will get better. They may not seem like it right now, but things will get better. Well, I tried going to church, where I went to church with my wife for 39 years, and suddenly the seat next to me was empty. We used to join hands during the sermon, something we started when we were courting, and we continue that in the tradition. And suddenly she's not there anymore. For some reason, all the songs seem to generate about souls in heaven. And I'm down here. My best friend is up there, and I miss her dearly, and I'd tear up. The next thing you know, I'm crying and just want to get out of church because I felt awful. And Sunday's supposed to be the good day of the week. But that's one of the hardest days for people who are grieving. That's the day you spent most of the time together. And so I had a plan. I now had the freedom. I thought, well, I'll go to some other churches and visit some places. And if I'm going to cry in front of somebody, at least I can cry in front of strangers instead of my family and friends, even though I know they wouldn't understand. So I came over here to Trinity, and I went over to Arlington. Apparently my cousins go to the early service too because I didn't see anybody. But anyway, I came over here. And I'm standing out in the hallway, and I run into an old friend, a guy who used to give us rides to school. We didn't walk every day in the wintertime. And he says, hey, hi, you folks still in Cedar Bluffs? Folks. And it cut right there. I thought, okay, he doesn't know. So I could say, well, yeah. But I thought, well, he really should know. So I come over and told him, well, my wife just died a couple weeks ago, and I'm starting to tear up, and Bob Fagan puts his arm around my shoulder, and next thing you know, I'm weeping like crazy and just bawling, and I want to get out of here, and I'm feeling really bad, and I thought, well, so much for my plan. This isn't working very well. I go to lunch with my daughters at Village Inn that day, and I run into an old friend who used to work with me, and she says, how you doing? And I'm going, how you doing, or how you doing? And so I got to go, well, my wife died, and yeah, she knew. Well, I didn't know she knew. A year and a half later, I'm out at the care center when I could finally bring myself to go out there because I couldn't even drive by the care center where my wife was at for 4 months. I spent 8 hours a day out there after 8 hours a day at work. A lady out there saw me getting out of the car, and she says, hey, how's it going? And I said, well, some days are good and some days are bad, thinking she was talking to me. And she goes, well, just think of this. Just tell yourself, today she's going to have a good day. It was a year and a half ago. She's gone already. And so I had to tell her. So I came up with a new answer. If somebody says, how's your wife? I thought, God only knows. Because really he does. He's the only one who knows. Well, I came to Trinity here, and I sat down in the pew, in my little seat over there, and opened up the bulletin, and it says, Grief Share, Tuesday night, just like it says in the bulletin today. I thought, Grief Share, that must be some sort of support group, something, a place that I could go and talk to people, because I really need to talk to people. So I call up the office, and they says, well, it's a 13-week session. They were already padded their way through it, but you're welcome to come. So I came, and I introduced myself, and we told each other our situations, and one of the ladies says, 5 weeks? Oh, you're brave. And I thought to myself, I'm not brave. I'm desperate. I need to talk to somebody really bad. Well, grief sharing, the statement says, grief sharing is a friendly, caring group of people who will walk alongside you through one of life's most difficult experiences. You don't have to go through the grieving process alone. And that's so true, because you got somebody to talk to, and it's one of the things they say is that's the one place you can talk to somebody where everybody else knows what you're talking about. When you go to Grief Share, if you have the need for it, and I really highly recommend it, that's why I'm here putting the plug in for it, you'll learn buzzwords, grief buzzwords and grief buzz phrases. Phrases like memory triggers, being ambushed by grief, the new normal of your life, waves knocking you down, the roller coaster, and the one that's hardest, lean into it. Memory triggers, that's like when you're doing just fine and you think you're handling it, and you're driving down the road and you see the little purple house on the side of the road. That's the same purple house you saw as you went to Omaha or once a month at the doctor's, and your wife would say, there's a little purple house, we've got to turn here, and suddenly you're in tears. Or maybe you're out weed whacking and you got your headphones on and you hear a song come on in your ears, and all of a sudden you're working and your tears are running down your face, and you're, oh my, you thought you were getting better. Ambushed, grief ambushed. It's sort of the same thing. You're sitting in church singing a month after your wife had died, a mighty fortress is our God. And then you get to the third verse about losing your wife, and suddenly you're not singing anymore. You're sitting in there bawling. I didn't think I meant my wife, every time I was saying that all the years before. Another thing is being ambushed, or being the grief of wave coming over you. That's like standing on the side of an ocean and all of a sudden a wave comes and knocks you down. Or myself, I was walking along Lake Superior last year on the nice, easy to walk on wet sand. The wet sand should have been a tip, because 1 second later I'm standing in a foot of water, my tennis shoes and my socks are soaked. Just like that, you think you're doing just fine, and all of a sudden you're underwater. It comes and goes. A roller coaster ride. That's what I tell people. I says, when I run into people that are now in this situation, I said, it's like a roller coaster ride. Get on, hang on, because you're in for a ride. And then I was just telling somebody not that long ago, I says, the roller coaster seems to be the bumps are getting lower and lower and farther apart. And then a week later, you crash and burn, and you realize you're not as far as you thought you were. Another thing they tell you to do is to write a grief letter to yourself. Write down your feelings, how grief is taking hold of you, how you're dealing with it, how God's helping you deal with it. I didn't do that, but I did write some songs of putting my thoughts of how I've been handling the grief. It started out at night when I couldn't sleep at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I would end my prayers with, show me the way, God. Where do you want me to go? Tomorrow, next week, next year. And the prayer got longer and longer, and finally I turned it into a song. One day I gave the song to my brother, who sings country western songs. And he handed me a song. He'd been out of work for a year due to corporate restructuring. He was wondering where his life was going. He was grieving. I handed him my song. My song was called, Lord, Show Me the Way. His song was, Jesus, Jesus, Show Me the Way. They both had 4 verses. In those 4 verses, there was 8 separate, similar statements of faith. And I'd tell people that, and they go, oh, that sounds godly. I don't think it's godly. I don't know if this is all that surprising. We both have the same Christian education, and we both have the same upbringing. So maybe it wasn't all that surprising. Well, in the time I did this, I wrote one song, and then I wrote another song, and then I wrote another song, and I've been passing them out, giving them to anybody that'll take them. I left the box out in the hallway. There's samples there. Please take 1 or 2 or 3. There's CD-ROMs. There's DVDs. I give some to my cousins. One of them called me up the other day and says, "Would you have the words to those?" I says, why? He says, because I want to sing along with them. So anyway, it's my way of sharing. It's my way of dealing with it. It's my way of dealing and the healing that God has given me. And the one last thing that the Grief Share does is, if you're not a going to meeting type person, they have a daily email. Every day you get an email, and I signed up for it, and it was surprising how those emails some days would relate so much to that I was thinking about that day. It really hit the spot. And they seem to progress as you progress in your healing, that the message is that they give you goes along with that. One of the last emails I got, though, the title says, a smart famous person once said, grieving is good for you. And I thought to myself, boy, what a doofus would say something like that. Grieving is good for you. His name was Paul, St. Paul. In Romans chapter 5, he says, grieving is good for you, because grieving and sufferings, you will have to persevere to get through it. And I thought of another time I was grieving and persevering. Basic training, 1965. We were all grieving and getting our way through basic training and persevering through that badly. And at the end of the 8 weeks, St. Paul says, after you've persevered, you will have character. Builds character in you. And I thought, who had more character than us, the Americans, fighting man? We thought we were the top of the world at the time. And St. Paul also says that once you have the character, you'll have hope. And hope, we'll all have hope in eternal life. Hope that I'll see Linda again. We won't be married, but I know I'll be able to see her again. And Grandpa and Grandma, my mom and dad, and my older brother, and all the other people I lost. And I also hope that someday that when I step over that threshold, God will be standing there with his arm out. Put his arm around my shoulder, just like Bob Fagan did, and say, welcome home. Welcome home. Thank you.
Let's thank Vern for sharing this morning, if we could. I can take that. I know nobody ever claps for the pastor after they share, but it's great to have Vern do that. We're going to play one of his songs. Vern, has the blessing of not only going through the grief, but also God had given him the words. And, while we heard our 7th and 8th graders sing today, part of what he said is we understand that in this congregation, we have valued Christian education. And part of why we value Christian education is exactly for getting through the tough times whenever they come. So that in the middle of all of that, we have phrases and verses that come back to mentor us and teach us. And if you listen to Vern's songs, you can hear the progression of healing as it goes on. Doesn't mean the hurt is gone. So let's go ahead and play the song, if you would.
Lord God, what will I do? What will you lead me to? I strap on my tunes and go for a walk. Me and myself with no one to talk. trouble me, your loving kindness. I now follow thee. My mind wants to linger on memories past, but only things done for my Savior will last. My mind wants to linger on memories past, but only things done for my Savior will last. Lord God, what will I do? What will you lead me to? Lord God, what will I do? What will you lead?
I think Vern's first song was what, Show Me the Way. Second one was You Can't Drive with Tears in Your Eyes. And in the progression, there is something to be said for where God leads us. Now, memories,